Okay. Welcome to the Camden Harbor Committee meeting, August 7th, 7:30 in the morning. Start off with meeting procedures. In order to facilitate the public's understanding and to maintain a complete and orderly meeting, the format and procedures will be as follows. The meeting is being electronically recorded and minutes are being taken. Minutes shall consist of a condensed summary of the facts of the meeting. Meetings are broadcast in their entirety on cable channel 1303 or YouTube under the Town of Camden. To maintain order, all comments or questions must be directed through the chair. Public comments are encouraged and important to the process. To maintain clarity, please exclude irrelevant or unduly repetitious comments. Each speaker must state his or her name, residence, and connection or interest in the topic prior to speaking. Please speak into the microphone. Speakers and committee members are requested to come to the meetings prepared to discuss matters in a clear and concise manner. It is the committee's intention to conduct meetings in a fair and unbiased manner. Okay, with all that, let's begin. Are there any non-agenda items? Yes.
Want me to use the microphone?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I should be saying this here or at the select board, but is there any way heading down into the parking lot to the waterfront, to the boardwalk, if we could mark one of those sides on like the little road down or the driveway down to the parking lot where it says pedestrians walk here, because nobody knows where to walk. And it's backing up traffic on Main Street. And it's kind of dangerous. And I know there's two sides that have little lines, but there's people put their signs for their stores there. Just no one knows where to walk. So I've actually thought about 2 in the morning with a can of spray paint, but I figured I'd ask you guys first. That's right.
He was thinking about it. He didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's always been an issue, hasn't it? I know the town has discussed it, the planning board has discussed it, and I'm not sure. This is the correct committee to talk about that.
I think I'd send it off to the select board. You know, because
That's, that's kind of like a downtown work group committee issue.
Safety issue.
Yep.
you know, it's partly a police issue, it's partly a public works issue, it's, you know, there's a lot of different people in the town that involves.
I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. You know, there's been discussions in the past of how do you get people to take the walkway 100 feet to the left.
I know how. Don't make it look like the ghetto.
So, any other non-agenda items? How about you, Aaron? Waste?
What's that?
A waste issue maybe you want to discuss?
Waste issue?
Yes. The holding tanks?
Oh, I was talking to Abby a little bit, but we never finished our conversation.
Yep,
But I was trying to give her the CFR information
yep.
to make it helpful.
Have you found that?
No, because I thought it was printed on my Marpole placard down below. But the particular Marpole placard I have now no longer has the CFR stuff. But it seemed like to me she was talking to, she knew when we were talking, she knew that the safety officer was up in Emmett, so I was off Belfast.
Yep.
So I haven't finished the loop with her, but I haven't been here for a few days.
Okay.
I was on that Eggemonger retrace.
So, if you want to look it up,
Did you find it?
it's under 33 CFR 159.7. And I do have this information if you want to catch up with me later,
Yeah.
so we can clear that up. So, I guess under agenda, no, we'll put that under new business. Okay, so I guess that moves us into Day Sailor Association. You guys are up.
Should we, Mark, should we approve the minutes from previous two?
Where are we here, maybe? Oh, okay, I've got a different, yes, good call. So, the first minutes were June 13, 2019. Any discussion on those? Motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion?
Second? Now, all in favor? Minutes approved for June 13. Next minutes, July 10th. Any discussion? Motion to approve?
Motion.
Second? All in favor? Minutes for July 24th, yes.
There's only, are you voting?
No,
There's only 4 people voting,
it was unanimous, so I guess it doesn't matter, but
except for, isn't an alternate supposed to be
Oh, yeah.
designated.
picked to vote when the, one of the voting committee members?
Yes.
Again, because I'm leaving, no, I'm
Ron,
leaving
fix you.
in 20 minutes, so.
Okay,
What? Okay,
you're in.
all right.
It's your
I
week,
approve of
it's
them.
your week.
July 24th minutes. Any discussion? This lays out the committee's work plan for 2019, which is a working document, so can continually change.
So my only question would be, are we putting that work plan in order each meeting sequentially as it's
No.
presented, or?
No,
should
no,
we
what
be-
we did is we broke it down into the 4 different areas that the comprehensive plan suggests.
But but are we going in that order?
No,
Oh, okay,
no.
lucky dip.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll kind of prioritize, and we've, at the last meeting, we've given assignments to different members,
Yeah.
so when they
Oh,
have
okay,
something
so
to
we-
discuss, then we
say we're ready, okay.
discuss it.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, does the work plan is the work plan submitted to the select board for review?
Yes, I presented to Audra. We will meet with the select board. I believe they're scheduling us for September,
At one of their regular?
at one of the regular meetings, yes. Yep.
And at which point they'll give us some feedback on our work plan?
Yes.
Is that the expectation?
Yes.
I see we do not have a select board representative today.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, approval of the minutes. All in favor? That brings brings us to new business. And new business is Abby has given us her suggestions for contract amendments for waste disposal for the day sailors. Thanks. You all probably just received that today. Have we gotten this in the past, or?
I don't actually have a copy of that.
It should be in your, can I see it in the packet? This is what it looks like. No? All right.
Seen that.
I'll read it then. First thing she wants to add is that all license holders must fully comply with the state of Maine federal no discharge area designation and Section 312 of the Federal Clean Water Act. Failure to comply with state and federal vessel discharge regulations will result in immediate termination of contract with the town of Camden. Statement 2, at any time or upon discretion of the town of Camden, harbor master possesses the authority to conduct inspection of vessel marine sanitation devices to ensure sufficient function. This authority is maintained under Section 312 of the Federal Clean Water Act. That's Abby's recommendation. I don't think we need to address it at the moment. It's a work in progress, and we'll just add it to our discussion for the contract when that time comes. Okay, now that brings us to Day Sailor Association.
Good morning. My name's Aaron Lincoln, and I own two of the day sailors in Camden, the OLAD and the OWL. And just going to speak for everybody this morning, but it's not all about me. It's just so you know, I'm one of the speakers. So I think that you guys all got this in your packet, which says Day Sailor Association in agreement with the following. Does that sound right?
Yes.
So two things I just want to say. One, we don't want to belabor all kinds of stuff that's gone through and make it as brief as possible. This whole section where it says Windjammer license agreement stuff, we were just part of this, but none of us feel like we should have, although maybe some of it involves some of us in some ways, we feel like mentioning this without the Windjammers here is not appropriate. So we just feel like that whole section we'd like to skip through this morning, just because probably the Windjammers won't be available to come and talk like they had in the past. Does that seem okay? We just kind of table that for today.
That's right on track.
And then I think if we looked at all of these things, so we basically took the list that had been written at the end of these meetings, and we distilled it into this list, right? We had, Ben Ellison had given us a copy of the list where we were when we stopped talking about these things. And so this list represents that. But I think if we really distilled it down to the most important things that we had on this list, we would tell you we would really like to work on this, like the length of the schedule, like, our term of our contract, and having the schedule reflect more in tune with what's actually happening down on the dock than the way it has been written, because things have changed over time. And we'd really like to also stress the importance of talking about the ticket table locations and the redevelopment of the harbor. I think those are our two most true concerns, to really boil this down. Part of the reason that we've just worked really hard over a long time to adjust that schedule, and it seemed like that even at the end of the select board meeting when they voted on our licenses, it came up that none of that stuff showed up before the last vote. So just to show you that the select board was thinking about it too, and why we did this. We didn't just do this, we were, asked to work on this. So on the actual scheduling and some of the verbiage that goes along with, how long our contracts are and things like that.
Let's take each issue separately.
Yep, that's fine.
The length of contracts. And this is, everybody chip in on this.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Aaron, why is the association asking to extend the term to 3 years?
Well, truthfully, the process of us applying for the application every year, they kind of go together with the actual scheduling questions we are, but it always has felt that every year they could just totally change the schedule of what we're doing. When I say we, the town or the select board or the harbor committee or the harbor master. And we're running a business, so, I'm selling weddings for 2020 already, and then the threat that maybe our schedule will just completely change every year, and that I'll have to go back to said person who's invested quite a bit into a wedding, that the town has requested we change our schedule. So part of it, I think, is just the fact that it's always been kind of like this floating thing out there from year to year. And also, I think that just the fact that every year we have to get together and put all this paperwork together, and it's like, it's the same group of people coming in year after year and applying, for the most part, it seems a little redundant. And maybe there's a way to work it out where there's tenure for people that have been here for a certain amount of time versus people who would like to apply for a spot. I don't know, like, it's a working group and we realize that.
My thoughts on this is that it makes sense. I don't think asking for a 3-year agreement is unreasonable.
Yep.
You're operating a business, and you need to know what's coming in the future.
Right.
To put together your business plan.
And I think the rules,
What I don't understand is the changing in the scheduling. What's going on there?
well, so, having done this for 20 years now, if somebody else does come in, right, and it's a little bit of a process to have people understand how the schedule works down there, because there's a lot going on down there. So, basically the schedule reflects that there's only the chance of being on the dock to unload and load passengers, and you can only been in there and out in 15 minutes. But, over the years, we've had to make that work so we can have lunch breaks and other things like that. So if somebody else comes in and they want to change the schedule, right, they can say, well, this slot looks like it's open, but just because it's open doesn't mean that we don't need it for some reason. Does that make sense? Like, when,
I guess that's,
in other words, if you were running the same schedule for the last 10 years, right, somebody came and said they wanted your schedule, right, every year this comes up, like it's up for grabs in a way on paper, but, well,
is that the way the agreement reads?
we basically submit an application with our scheduling requests every year. But it seems like we should be able to ferment that schedule somehow, especially for, it doesn't mean that if somebody came along and wanted to move a schedule with a vacancy.
It's a big talk, a big conversation for the committee, because the way it's written, it shows that the town, and this is my take, I remember talking with Jim French about it, that the town wanted to keep it so there was some liquidity and not make it so people would come in and then solidify and make it so it's a certain way and it can't be changed. So, like, that schedule is the schedule that the town thinks works right now. If the town, select board want to change what's going on, a quick history, they had 7 permits for the longest time, they only gave out 5, and that worked. And then finally, we got 2 boats that pretty much fit well enough where the committee said, oh, let's put them in, they're small boats. So now there's 7 boats. The way it reads now, it's that, there's a schedule that's set that the harbor master makes every year. The harbor master looks at the schedule from last year and will give that preference, but it doesn't mean that it can't be changed. That's the way it reads now. It looks like Aaron's saying that he wants to, I think you hear that you're saying because you've had so many years, you want to make it concrete so no one can come in and change anything. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I don't want to change my schedule, but I also, it's more the worry that like every year, you know, like basically I build my budget on what I'm scheduled and allowed to do, right? And it kind of feels like every year I have to sort of like defend that schedule. So do you see?
Let me read this to you. I mean,
Absolutely.
In the licensing agreement, it says harbor masters' master schedule from the year immediately prior shall take precedence in establishing any subsequent proposed schedule. So isn't that kind of what you're asking for? I mean,
Yeah, but I think I'm more asking so that we're not going through all of this paperwork to do that every 3 years, so that it's kind of hard to explain this process in a sense, unless another boat's coming in, and then it's really obvious to see. Does that make any sense?
We've been, I think it was 2 years ago. It was
Sorry, Steve, I know.
April, beginning of May, and you were trying to get our boats ready. We were spending days, hours, trying to fit this new boat in with their new schedule that they
Right.
just requested.
In May.
In May. And we just want to avoid that.
Right, like it should be done basically, like this should be done in the winter. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So if somebody does want to make a scheduling change, trying to make that scheduling change like in the middle of the summer is really not okay. I mean, it's just almost impossible, and it just doesn't cause any, it causes nothing but ill will is what it does. Like when we send that in November, we kind of feel like it should be done.
And maybe I can clear something up here. If, as harbor master, I never allowed a vessel to spend more than the actual allotted time that they're allowed, 15 minutes on the dock. Get on the dock, do what you need to do, and that's what this could be discussed, but right now it says you can't stay on that dock face for more than 15 minutes unless you have permission by the harbor master. So basically what happens is the boat comes in, and a long time ago, especially when there were only 5 boats, Jack and Barbara would always be like, well, no one's here for the next hour and a half. Could we stay and have lunch instead of moving our boat to the mooring? And Jim would be like, well, you can stay there for 45 minutes, have your lunch, because no one else cares. I'm not going to put another boat there, visiting boat there, because they might go take off and not come back in an hour. So, you know, the harbor master before me never put a boat on there, even if there was space and no one was running, because that was the day sailor dock. So the day sailors, over the time, I've always allowed it because it kind of made sense. I'm not using the dock. They ask the other day, as long as they're talking with each other, I would let them stay more than 15 minutes. So these big blocks all of a sudden came up, not my schedule, but there would be a schedule like, okay, the surprise is here from 11 to 12:45, and it's not doing anything. So then when Ray came in with his boat, he's like, well, I thought you only allowed to be 15 minutes. What's the 15 minutes that the surprise or the OLED is supposed to be there? I need to break in on their lunch hour, sitting at the town docks, and I need to now run a business because the select board has approved my permit. So that's what they're talking about. And not only that, but Ray was a little lax, and of course it was kind of getting close to season, and here we are having coffee at, trying to figure this out. And I believe that's what they're talking about. At least make it so if a day sailor comes in and the select board approves it, a new one, that they have to submit their schedule, where they want to be, and have me okay it, and obviously I'll talk to these guys and say, hey, here's the new schedule, in somewhere December instead of June.
Yeah,
June.
right. And I don't think that,
Yeah, a certain date.
so the 15-minute thing doesn't really reflect totally. I mean, some of us have 15-minute slots where we come in and out, but there's a couple places every day where every boat has like a half-hour break, but it's almost just necessary. I mean, you got to be able to load and unload things. Since it's gone from 5 boats to 7 boats, having that little extra time like fermented down is important to us. And the other thing is, we don't really, like, if you look at that way that would work, is like if you came in and say there was a half-hour break in between trips, and you did the 15 on and 15 minutes, you'd have to leave and then come back. So it doesn't make sense anyway, like
So
if
what
you.
resolves that? Just a 30-minute break?
Well, yeah, so we also all agreed to get rid of having longer breaks more than 30 minutes. Like, none of us has more than a 30-minute break anymore.
Okay.
But we do have, every boat has to have a couple of them, even just to get catering and stuff on board. It's
So if
It's
you
pretty
change the
tight.
wording, if you change the wording to say,
up to 30.
no more than 30 minutes.
Yep.
So then that would give you a 30-minute slot if you needed it, but if you wanted to
Yeah.
move around, help somebody else out, then
Yep.
it's in there.
And it
So,
sounds to me like there should be a time frame that any new applicant needs, it needs to be processed and agreed by, I would say, March 1st, so that people can go into the spring prep season knowing.
Say, we want to make it so, if we really want to, it actually should be, when they submit in November, and then you guys have a discussion, that should be fermented in January, February, because these guys
Schedule.
may change. If Aaron, over the years, he's got a set schedule that he prints out, and so does, they all do. Now, about 4 years ago, we had a flurry, and we were changing things around a little bit, tweaking things, and it's now settled down to where it's pretty much set where it's going to be for a while.
We're selling tickets for next summer now.
Yeah, so I would say
Times have changed.
that to make this so in the future, we don't have another, pretty much craziness like we did, we should make it so if a new applicant comes in, let's say, just suppose that one of the vessels leaves, and now we have an opening and someone comes in, that they should, by November 15th, I believe it says, that's when you have to apply to say, I want to request that the select board take a look at this, and can I run my boat off this? It fits all the requirements, and the select board, and the harbor committee looks at it, they then advise the select board, they like it. Select board says, okay. It should say somewhere that your schedule should be approved by the harbor master by, a certain date, and it should be something like,
By, why not by,
End of March?
I would say.
well,
December 31st.
upon,
If it's
how
November
about
15th.
upon approval of this licensing
Right,
agreement?
they have to submit their schedule with their
Yes,
application.
yes.
So why is that, why would we separate that? When we approve
Yeah.
or deny their application, you're part of that process.
Yes.
So at that point, you could say, yes, this works,
could do
this
that.
fits in, this doesn't.
Yep.
I don't think you separate it.
You can make it so it's with the application, and it gets, when it gets agreed upon, when the select board say, we agree it, you can run next year, that actually, here's the schedule that's been presented, okay by the harbor master, and there it is.
And the select board does your permits in December?
They're voting in December.
And
Usually the first select board meeting in December. Truthfully, it used to be kind of like that, and then at some point, I think for flexibility reasons, like, I remember the first time anybody changed was Al. Al changed something. He actually wanted to remove some of his trips. He wanted to do less trips. So, he came and was like, well, I was thinking I'd do less trips, and if I do less trips, could I have this one period of time to make my day shorter? So, we all kind of looked at it, and it was favorable for everybody, so we agreed. But now it's way more complicated than it ever was, and there's just so many more scheduled trips leaving off of the dock than there ever was, so.
So, it sounds to me, just to simplify all that. if
Mark,
we-
please simplify me, it's a good idea.
If we extend this to 30 minutes, and then tie the schedule into the licensing agreement, it's all wrapped up and done at the same time.
Everybody in our little posse sound like that's what we're talking about? Yep. That sounds great, even. I'll even say.
Does that make sense?
I'd be
everybody?
thankful.
Are we still talking a 3-year term?
Well, no, that was just talking about the scheduling. The 3-year term, I would suggest a 3-year term with an annual performance evaluation, per se.
That's done when you're approving the applications anyway, isn't it?
Well, no, but
Performance sort of that we're agreeing, we're working together with everybody.
yes, but with a 3-year term, it would be done every 3 years. My proposal proposal would be just that each year you have just a performance evaluation to,
Is that just the harbor master
yeah,
giving a summary of the season?
informal,
and saying
informal, the
everything?
harbor master, or, you know, presenting it to the committee, or,
But let's say one goes rogue one summer. They were all in the midst of their 3-year term.
Yeah.
One goes rogue and the review is, what does that do? Are we pulling the license for that
Terminate, yeah.
person?
yeah.
The select board has the power to
Yeah.
get rid of anybody at any time.
I have a concern about the 3-year term, is
Okay.
that you might, and if you want to make any changes and you've got staggered votes, like you've got, surprise one year, OLED the next year, somebody else the next year, you want to change it, you're going to have votes on the last year of the term, okay, we'll change this guy, but we can't change these two, so we can't really make the change. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that any changes will be very difficult because they'll never come to a point where they're all
Why would they be
terminating.
staggered though? Why not, like the Windjammers are not staggered, the
Yeah.
Windjammers are all in the same cycle.
And the-
The example of somebody goes out of business. Or the
Yeah.
boat changes hands, you know, you.
Well, I was gonna suggest that I like this idea of a 3-year term, but if it's either a new applicant or maybe a change of ownership, that could be a 1-year term for the first
Or
year
maybe
or something like that.
fill
to
out
sort
the
of-
term of the last,
Okay, how about a 3-year term,
all at the same time.
all ending on the same date?
Right.
So a boat changes hands after a year. The agreement doesn't automatically go with the boat, right? They have to reapply, but then it would be due on the same day, all
They
the
complete
others.
the term.
Yes.
If they were
Yeah.
approved for that new license, they
Yeah.
complete the next 2.
Yeah, I like that.
So how would you word that?
I have to go. Could I just ask a question?
Yes.
These licenses are issued to the owner-operator, not to the vessel.
Correct.
There's a vessel name in the agreement, is there not?
Right.
That seems to be an issue that
So,
can be discussed.
Completely on a different tack, at some point, it'd be really nice to just write down the process of training ownership. Having done it once myself, I can tell you it's pretty vague, and it's also really vague for the Windjammers. It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's going to be okay, and then you have to buy the boat. But I think that is a huge thing that should just be addressed. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. You're right on to something that I really appreciate.
I think that the town needs to consider, what do they want here for boats?
Yeah.
Do we want to keep traditional sailing vessels here, or are we open to red catamarans and pirate flags?
I hope we like these old boats.
I hope so too.
I kind of love them myself.
Keep saying we need to decide what we want the harbor to look like, and if we don't extend some conversation about whether or not we're going to keep the vessels,
Yeah.
Aren't the agreements currently with the business, and in the license agreements, they specify the vessels that are operating under that agreement? So if they were to change and Revito was to swap out Surprise for a red catamaran, then that would be a change in the agreement that he would have to apply for, am I correct?
Yeah, there is no provision for changing that outside of the actual date of the agreement, but there was no way when I bought the boat that I was able to put my application in by the 15th because I was being held up by federal regulations. I could have waited one more full year, but what ended up happening is I just asked the select board for a variance in that moment, and they allowed me to sit and transfer the schedule, but there really should be a provision just written down so that people just know how to do that, because it's the same thing for, like, when Garth bought the Louis R. French, he actually told me, he's like, well, they just told me it was going to be okay, and then I bought the boat. But I don't think that a bank would do that anymore, so,
There are some banks that wouldn't look nicely at that.
I mean, honestly, I think that the banks would probably be pretty interested in the conversations we're having about these schedules, too. You know,
the bank's going to be much more in favor of a 3-year contract than a 1-year.
Yeah.
It was tough when 5 years ago when we bought the Lively Lady, I had to say, well, where are you going to run it? Say, well, hopefully, I'm going to run it off the day sailor dock.
yeah.
I actually had to buy the boat, and then after buying it, come to the town and, reapply and get approved and all that stuff, which was a bit of a gray area. They did work with me, but it was a lot tougher than if I said, well, it already has a, 2 years left of its 3-year agreement. So that would
So-
definitely made it easier.
So I think, I just want to speak plainly. I don't want to get labored down in this particular topic at the moment, but it would be really nice in the near future to put this on the agenda as a separate item, because I think it's important. I do really feel like it would help protect these boats that have been here for a long time.
And Aaron, could you state the item that you'd like to be on the agenda, just to clarify it?
I would love to have on the agenda for the future a item that says the discussion of the correct verbiage to talk about the transfer of a vessel mid-season or other from one owner to another. Mid-contract, or there must be some provision for sale, basically. Is that closer, Elliot?
Yes, okay.
I need a word doctor.
So how are your
Provision,
businesses
right.
set up? Is it a DBA?
I think everybody's probably different. I'm a S corp, but part of that, is dictated by insurance and how you get insured on the town docks. Like if you bought your boat more recently, a lawyer would probably push you into that direction.
What I'm thinking here is the contract, if it read something like Aaron Lincoln, DBA, the OLAD, that ties the boat into the contract.
Yep. My S corp was like fully found is what it is, but it's tricky because most of the boats are owned by the people, and they are basically leased by the corporation. And I could explain the reasons for that, but that's like not a 5-minute conversation. But I think there is a way to do that. I'm just not sure how.
So,
But I do like what you're thinking there.
okay.
What if you did DBAs and like if you had 3 line items that said the person's name, the corporation and or, just write, if owned by corporation, if it's run by corporation, and then put a DBA in there, because I think that would.
How about, and this would all have to be run through attorneys in the town,
Yeah.
If it said something like Aaron Lincoln and Schooner Oleg,
And again, the
ties it all
The
together.
Windjammer license basically does that. The Windjammer license says this agreement made between the town of Camden and person's name, business name, having a principal place of business in Camden, which operates the schooners blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's all, you've tied all of it together.
Yeah,
So I
wheels
think
already
we
Wheels already been created, invented, and it's rolling.
Yeah.
take it over.
I have another question here. It says here, this agreement is made between the town of Camden and a municipality located in Knox County, state of Maine, hereinafter referred to as Camden, and blank, which would be the name, of Camden, Maine.
Right. It doesn't necessarily
Does it
say that
have to be
you.
a resident of Camden?
It's an
Why
interesting.
that's in there?
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike.
Or is that just, was that?
Long-term typo.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why we were kind of asked to go over these license agreements, is
Yeah.
because they were written so long ago, they're quite outdated. And that's why we've been doing a lot of this work, is try to bring them up to today's times. So there's a lot of stuff like that in there.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question in general. Right now, we have 7 day sailor licensees, is that correct?
Yes.
And how many of those 7 are running another boat?
2.
2. And that second boat can be a variable from year to year? Is that a reasonable statement?
You have to apply for it just like you apply for your day sailor license.
Okay. Okay, and say that we have a 3-year agreement, and in your second year, you want to add a second boat. And presumably that would be added to your,
It's a second application, and I could not tell you, maybe you guys could tell me, you probably could tell, is that that second agreement was, or the contract or the application was being rewritten, and I don't know if it ever was completely rewritten, but I feel like that I couldn't tell you what it looks like now, but Ramito probably could speak better to that. Maybe I should just hand him microphone.
This year, there was a newer form, application form for the second boat. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I would think that if, on that subject, if the select board, if you guys decide to move this and move that forward and advise the select board that they change the day sale agreement to a 3-year term, that makes a little sense because their business, which they're running out of Camden, it's a solid business. They need to know that the second boat could be, it's just a 1-year term. Every year they've got to reapply for the second boat that they're selling tickets for. Because they could still run that business without selling tickets at their table for it. It wouldn't, so they could leave that as just a 1-year term, and every year they've got to say, oh, here's the boat.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, that second boat is only for selling tickets.
Right.
They're not for
They don't
use of the
use the
float or operating from town property. It's
Well-
only selling tickets. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, correct. Yeah, we have to run the second boat off a private dock, not from town landing. But if we talking about putting 3-year contract for all of the licensed boats, I think we should do the same thing with the second boats too, because the schedule for the second boats, although we work for private boats, it still kind of works year after year, and we need to look ahead from the next year. So
How would that work? It doesn't operate off the town dock.
No.
So why?
no, but we still have to print schedules and sell tickets for the following year. Now
Where would that be our purview? If you're operating off another dock, it's not up to us to tell that dock owner when you can come and go.
No, I understand that, but we still, want to plan ahead and try to,
I think part of the agreement should be, as it is, that they can sell tickets for a second boat from their ticket facility. But that's where the discussion, that's where our
That's
role
where it
ends.
ends.
Exactly.
That's where it ends.
And that would be included in that 3-year term, if you so choose. As I understand it, every boat that is,
I think in a way, we're trying to simplify things. So if you had to apply for the second boat every year, that just kind of, in a way, defeat the purpose of, why not just add,
Well, first of all, I think that the second boat is, that was put in there as trial basis. So that hasn't been established that that's going to continue that way.
I don't believe so. I think it's been approved, and there's a proper application form now, and this is the 3rd year that we run it, so that way. So I don't think it's trial basis anymore.
It was trial for, first year,
Yeah.
maybe? And then, I'm not 100% sure, but,
Yeah. I don't know.
how long do you do a trial for?
The only thing I would like to see different with that, I don't think it's a big change, is that I feel like you should be able to apply for your license, right? And then that has to happen after. Does that make sense? Like, you have to have a day sale license to apply for the second boat? Like, I haven't gone down that road, maybe a couple times in my head, but right now I feel like I got enough on my plate that I'm pretty darn happy, but it just makes logistical sense. Like, the only thing about that thing that's always a little weird to me is that you need to have your application approved, whether it's done in the same meeting or not. That makes sense, but last year I felt like they were all done as one packet, and I think that was kind of weird. It's almost like you could have, on the agenda, put the second boat before you put the first boat, right? You could have voted on the second boat before you even voted on the first boat. Does
Not even
anybody,
run the first boat, you just run the second boat.
do you see where I'm going with that?
Oh, yeah, but that's not the way I understand it. You've still got to have the boat you're running off the dock there.
Right.
And in addition to that, you could sell tickets for a second boat.
Yeah, but I think when they attach that in the meeting, that they shouldn't be all voted as one whole. You should do one, and then get everybody approved, and then go back. Do you understand what I'm saying? It was a little weird last year. It was like they just approved everything as a packet, but I was like,
Well, I think all of the boats, the licensed boats to run out of the dock, the town dock, and the second boats, they all have to be approved first by the harbor committee and then by the select board. So you guys recommend all of the boats first, and then the select board do the final approval.
Yeah.
Yes, and just to, so everybody understands the process, the licensing agreement, we make recommendations, okay? And Jeremy Martin, Audra, draft up the licensing agreement, and then it goes to the attorney, and they approve it. So it's, you know, that's how it all comes together.
Yeah. And there's no reason to beleaguer that, any kind of thing here. Basically, you guys are asking that, one of the things you're asking for is that this committee advises the select board that you move your one-year contract to a three-year contract. And Mayor, you think it'd be good if you have the ability to also sell tickets for a second boat, that stays within that stays tied into the three-year
Yeah,
contract?
just tied all together within a three-year contract on the day selling.
All right, that's basically it.
Okay. Okay,
And then are we still working on this, or?
I think we discussed that.
Okay, so I just have one little point here. I just want to add why I put the, would like to be able to rent town slips for boarding during special circumstances, because we have the Lively Ladies a little bit different. We can carry 35 people. We don't. It's just too packed. We do carry, 26, 28, and,
I understand where you're coming from that,
yeah.
and Steve, maybe you could help out on this. I mean, couldn't they just do that anyways? I mean, that's, to me, that falls under harbor management. And you come to Steve and say, hey, I've got a charter,
Yep.
we want to pick up at the town dock, and
Yeah, I'm just trying to, because we deal with the cruise ships, we're dealing with, every other person's got a walker. We got 26, 28 people coming all the way around and down, and if I could rent a slip, that would be amazing.
how do you feel?
Well, I'm fine with it. I ran into a small issue when we're really busy this spring, and, in the ordinance, at one point, it said that you're not allowed to run a day sailor business off the town overnight docks. It's been revised so many times, I can't really find that anymore.
I can't either.
So, yeah, we looked. I want to help Tom out. It totally makes common sense to have him park right next to that boat, when we can, and have them shuffle off and get right onto his boat and go. So I'm okay with it, as long as, you guys realize that I put up a quick stink that one morning because I want to make sure that I'm not doing something that is not in, that correlates with this.
I don't want to get Steve in trouble. So I like Steve.
Also, last year, the select board approved for the Windjammers to run day sales out of 15 days, out of the dock, out of the Portland,
Yep.
like all the three green boats, so.
They've always been allowed to do that. And
So
they
right-
always were allowed to run 3 days, and so already there was a somewhat of a conflict, because it says you can't run your day sailor business off the town docks, and yet they always were allowing that for 3 days.
So right now, the green boats, or more specifically the Mercantile, the Grace Billy, and the Mistress, they're allowed to run 15-day sales a year. So they are using those docks for loading and unloading passengers anyway.
My only question on this, Dom, is if you wanted to rent it, would you be using it sort of throughout the day? My only concern is if there was a cruise ship, for example, and you wanted to, do the transfer there, that makes total sense. But then, are you gonna rent it for the day and then it's gonna sit there empty after the cruise ship tour is done?
That all depends. I mean, if there is just a day rental, or if it's overnight rental, or it's whatever we work out with the harbor master. I mean, even if it's a half-hour rental, like I'm open to whatever. I'm even I would even sit down in April with my schedule and rent it for those days. And I've got a harbor float. I don't need to sit there at night. So I mean, I definitely, going to be back on the float.
That is, you're not operating out of the town docks.
Right.
All right, you're operating your business on the float over there.
Correct.
If you use the town dock, just a couple of times, I don't see that as really operating the business.
Yeah, good.
That's my take on it. I mean, right?
It's the only advice I need.
Yeah, it's just, I'm mostly, the only reason I brought it up is I just, within 15 minutes, I end up holding up these guys. And then once one boat gets held up, the next boat gets held up, and then it becomes a big mess.
But, I mean, if it becomes routine, then it will become a big mess.
Right. Yeah.
But, I don't see any problem with it. Does anybody else?
Yeah, maybe on occasion, be able to rent on
Yeah.
occasion,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da. Especially with the new ramp and all that, it does make more sense to even use that one.
I love that ramp.
You could try it until it becomes a mess.
Well, yeah, then it becomes when's the house trial period, Okay.
So, oops, go ahead, John.
One question on this document that you guys submitted, and it was the additional language section, and it said, tickets may only be sold, your suggestion, tickets may only be sold on the dock for boats that have a day sailor permit. And I just paused on that one. Isn't that currently the case? No. You can
advertise for anything you want, and then you can sell donuts out of a, not sell donuts, but you can advertise for donuts out of a sign if you want.
Yeah, there's no clear language that says that your table is there to sell tickets for your boat. It implies it. We were just thinking that maybe we just lock that right up.
Oh, see, the way I read that is you'd like to eliminate the extra boat. The way I read it.
Why would they want to do that?
I know Ramito doesn't want to do that.
So what it is, you're allowed to sell tickets for your official, permit boat, which is, the licensed boat, and for the second boat, if you have an approval, and you pay for your fees.
But
The problem is that the board that you have on your ticket seller, it can say whatever it is, whatever you want. You can advertise for real estate, you can advertise for selling donuts. It doesn't necessarily need to be the two boats that you're approved.
it doesn't describe what the signage,
Exactly.
what the requirements of the signage, it just says that you're allowed to have a sign.
There should not be any money exchange, or you cannot sell for anything else other than boats, so you can advertise for anything.
Advertise for boats.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Section 5F of the day sailor agreement that I have, last statement is, the only permitted item for sale shall be tickets.
Not advertised.
But not advertised.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about it. We ran into that
What
last
paragraph
year.
was that?
5F, page 2.
Itself is correct.
Okay.
You can advertise T-shirts but not sell them.
Correct.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and this was a,
Sale. So if we just put in there, the only permitted item for sale or advertisement shall be tickets.
Is there a problem with advertising for other things?
Yes, so there is one particular issue with one of the licensed boats that advertise for other boats, other than their two licensed boats.
why is that a problem? You just don't want to see more badging, or?
Want to make it fair for everybody, so like if you have your ticket seller, your ticket booth, not, you know, you can just sell tickets and advertise for the two licensed boat that you.
There's been a case where
Like,
someone just has the ticket, the day sailor dock permit, just to advertise, not even run.
Because it could become a lucrative thing for Camden Real Estate or whoever to do it.
No.
Verizon's reached out to me recently about putting a sign up down there.
Well, people can.
But it could happen that way.
Apply for the license for running boats and not running a boat and put a billboard sign on it.
Yeah. We,
State and donuts.
That just-
we don't want to be like the boardwalk,
I mean, since
New
it's
Jersey, basically.
pretty obvious what the agreement, we might have to change.
Anywhere like York,
Instead of.
you know.
And that's why I said, you
But
know,
then
if we
it's-
just say,
yeah, we just
you know,
modify it that way
items for
and then
sale or
enforce it.
advertising.
So if someone is in violation of this agreement, that's a separate issue. That's a second.
We went through this before with Audra, that she, the final approval of what it can be done on the, war or not, and then she said like, it doesn't say anywhere that you cannot advertise for anything you want, so that's why we're trying to change that and make it more.
It was some advice, basically.
Yeah,
Plus.
it gets a little touchy because Audra was kind of in a pinch, just to bring you guys up to snuff, because after the decision was made to alleviate the 3-day sales, to make it
Just gonna bring up
15-day
the dock
sales,
thing and then may have to table it for another.
Ray, who has a second vessel, was advertising his day sales for the Mercantile and Grace Bailey. And it became a point of, like, oh, is that right? Is that okay? And Ray thought it was okay, and for some folks, day sales didn't. So basically, what Audra did was like, okay, well, he can show people that he's got this 4 or 5 hour trip, different style trip, but he can't sell tickets there. So Ray was upset, and so were they, but at the same time, Audra made it so it worked, because the select board had already made the decision that the town wants to, you know, try to make more trips for people. So that's where we are with it right now, and we're still, as you can see, we're still trying to figure out what's fair and what's not. So that's basically to bring you up to speed. That's why these guys are bringing it up. So it's definitely a tough one for the town to figure out what the right course of action is. You guys are feeling right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's something. Nah, never mind.
I think it definitely deserves talk and discussion. The town needs to figure out, weigh the different things. You've got historic day sailors that are showing very well for the town. They do a great job with the product they give the visitors. I'm right in the middle of it. I watch it every day. So the idea is that the select board just recently said, well, we should make it so the Windjammers can do some day sales as well. Not 2-hour trips, but, a little bit longer with a meal. That was Ray's idea, was that I want to offer something that is kind of like what the Heron was doing, a longer trip with a meal, something that's not offered. He hasn't done many of them, but it definitely got these guys, their flags up. It's like, well, hey, is this going to impact our business?
It's been out quite a bit. Soon to be running in summertime. Summertime's been running.
Yeah, but they're running off their mooring,
Yeah.
not the docks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
I was just-
and that's the other thing.
Yeah.
We-
Is that the
we-
second boat? Versus-
Yes.
That's the other.
Yeah, summertime's second boat.
Sometimes the second boat, yeah.
He's loading up his mooring or off?
Steamboat or
steamboat?
mooring or something.
Steamboat landing.
He's not doing it in town.
Going off a
Yeah.
steamboat.
There's been no problem there.
I don't know where he's loading. The
He's-
passengers are getting on the boat in the mooring, but where the tender is loading, I don't know the answer to that. So from a town facility, okay.
The summertime is selling tickets off the boardwalk, at a table off the boardwalk.
And that's legit, I believe.
Out of a license. Yeah, he's got his license this year, and,
Margaret? Go ahead.
I can tell you that there have been exactly, we have had many reservations, and we have had many tickets sold for these dinner cruises, and exactly 4 of them have been sold off the public landing. So, relax.
No, no, man. We're saying you guys are doing great. You guys are doing fine. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, obviously,
we're not-
obviously, yeah, if the day sailors have come forth saying that they want to change that, that's something that needs to be definitely discussed
Yeah,
with you guys.
I think,
Because that's one of the problems, that's not a problem, it's just a point of contention, and we have to solve that, and the town has to make a decision, say, here's what we think is the best for the town, and move forward.
and I just want to just say, at the beginning of this meeting, I was really trying to work on 2 points, and I feel like there are a lot of important points on here. But I think that what we were really focused on was the contract and basically the redevelopment of the public landing. Because, the other thing that's bearing in our minds is last year in April, we thought for about 2 weeks that we were going to have to run out of the public landing. And it was also in April that we found that out. And, some of us had utilities that could not be run through the public lock, and also it's the drainage to the lot, and I can show you a great line of how much water actually goes where we were maybe possibly going to be last year. So the other concern we have is that we can't get in that same position. We're in April, and we're trying to put our boats together and move around at the same time.
From what I understand, or been told, is that that's a done deal, that's all designed, and you guys are moving over there next year?
Nobody has ever mentioned that to any of us.
That's,
Into the parking lot?
yes,
Yeah, so this would be a great example of,
yeah.
We have no idea. I mean, we've got our brochures say where we're located. We got a
yeah, and we have all kinds,
say that. We have no idea.
we have grandfathered telephone lines and power lines and all kinds of things that it's more, and also that's where all the water drains, and I can show you a great picture of where the water all came through, and you can see how the pollen shows you how high it is, but that's not really
Have you got any input on that?
Not that's gonna help move this conversation forward. Yeah, I think the best knowledge that I have was that it came up this year, moved everybody to the gazebo area.
Is that where the hot dog stand is?
Where is the gazebo?
Yeah, that same area. But that putting you guys in that position so late in the season obviously wasn't gonna work, so the idea was looking at doing something like that, and it's definitely not off the table, but looking at that next year and talking about it now. Does that sound right, Steve?
That's exactly right, yeah. Audra wanted to move, she's getting pushed by denizens of the town saying that the day sailors are kind of taking too much of the boardwalk up. That should be for more of a public use, not for private businesses. They like the day sailor businesses, don't think that they don't. But they wanted to try to move you a little bit off that. So we came up with an idea to put you in those 3 parking spots and build it up so it looked nice. And then, of course, when it got too late to do it, we were about to pull the trigger, and you guys were like, no, it's too late for this. We have to. And even I said to Audra, we're pushing it this late in the season to do this. So it's definitely not off the table. We got heavy into summer, so we haven't talked about it again. But we can talk about it again soon and see what they want to do. Personally, I don't feel, with moving the benches around, it seems like we alleviated some issues. We should have some more select board come down now and say, okay, this could still work. With the revitalization of what we're going to do to that whole boardwalk, making it wider and everything, it's up in the air.
We don't oppose the changes that need to be made. Obviously, it's a public structure, but the fact that nobody's really communicating with us, and I would wager that we have spent more time collectively down there than anybody.
This is our livelihood.
Yeah, so
But that's the point, all right? You've taken over the dock. You've spent more time there than anybody.
yeah,
I mean, it used to, I remember the days when everybody in town went down to the dock and sat on those benches
Yeah.
and ate lunch. And they can't do that anymore.
we're not even occupying a single bench this summer.
You're not, some boats are.
Okay, well, then I'm not aware of that, or I haven't caught on to it.
I think we all move off the benches.
Except for Ray. Yeah. I think that's it.
I think that was a plan for the, especially for the disc associations to get off the benches. So now we
Yeah.
have the benches around, and now we're not sitting on the benches, so all the benches.
I think with I think what Mark's saying is that your businesses have taken over in a good way, but they still, all your people waiting to go for your boats are all taking up the benches and other
Well,
people can't. So we're just trying to figure out how we can make it so you guys can still be very successful and we can have a lot of people enjoying the beautiful product that you're providing for the town. And no, you smirk, but it's true. You guys provide a beautiful product for people to come and enjoy this area. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that and still make it so your businesses can grow.
Yeah. I mean, when you're rebuilding the boardwalk, though, that'd be part of that plan. So,
Well, that's why we're doing this, is like, we got rid of the planters to show how nice it is, and I got a lot of kickback for that, moving the tree and all the, all that stuff. But in the end, it looks good. It shows people what the possibilities of that area is. If we did a mock-up, this is just the idea, and make a mock-up of what a nice area could look like for the day sailors, a small mini amphitheater with some nice trees. Then, when we do get some money, we can make it really nice and have it so you guys have your own area, we talked about how people coming in and out, having the wooden boardwalk go into those parking spots, so I wouldn't get afraid that it's going to all of a sudden put you in a mud hole. We're just talking about new idea.
The whole board to just go for on a busy day on the harbor and look for example, at noon, where it's busy time for us, because a lot of boats leave at noon, and the boardwalk is full of people. There is between 5 boats, including Alpador, it takes up to 49 passengers. The whole boardwalk is full of people. I mean, we're talking about solid people. And then the moment that all the boats leave the dock, it's empty. And I do it every time, because I'm the last one to usually go out.
Are you helping our point?
well, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm helping the point on that you guys trying to put us all in 3 parking spaces. So imagine all these 100 people or 80
Yeah.
or 50 trying
and
to go into 3 parking spaces and try to get tickets for reservation or check-in, all in 3 parking spaces.
So, we've discussed this. You are now aware that this is on the table.
Yep.
And the town is discussing it and seems to be going in that direction, okay?
What we're trying to do is, we are the person who operates this, and we are.
Is that, yeah?
Absolutely.
slow you down for 1 second. The real,
Way that
Yeah.
there's decisions.
real,
I would love to actually see those plans, and I think we should possibly all walk down there at some time.
Yep.
But, because
At noon.
when I took the day sale just last Saturday on the Overland, it is packed, and that's what the town of Camden I want to be like. It's very, very busy and vibrant, but when you said that this was a done deal, and I heard from Aaron, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I live in this town, that's the first I heard that there was an actual decision to herd them.
And-
Now I have an opinion about it that probably they're not gonna like, but it's still the first time I heard it, that was actually making progress. So if it was decided by the previous committee, I do think we should bring it back just so we can review and reflect and maybe add our 2 cents, because I hadn't read anything in the paper, nothing. Like, wow, when did this decision get made? Maybe I need to start sitting in select board meetings, but
well, I think the only thing I want to put in about this is that we have not, it's not like the first time we've ever heard these things, but I now, in the 20 years I've been down there, have 4 times sat through and listened to the same arguments, and 4 times on paper, twice with architects, have designed places for people to have a waiting area to get them off the boardwalk, because it'd be just as good for us. We don't want 20 people in front of the ticket table. Nobody does. We've know all the flow issues, and we can understand them. It's not like we're not trying to work with the town. But even the last time that we did this, I was actually told that I would retire before anybody would ever change anything down at the public landing. That was what I got. I got a pretty clear message there.
I'm just going to leave that name right out of here, but I'm happy that you guys are all here, and it's been from somebody who had the power to tell me to say that. But I feel like we've tried a few times, like we know what the public spaces are there, and we know how people move around. I mean, I can tell you that when they put the hotel in, it changed the way I had to sell tickets because of the flow on the dock. I mean, that's how really crucial these little changes are. So when I say that, like, we would like to work with you, we would like to work with you, and we have tried. It's just that all these subcommittees, I sat through, I don't know how many of them last year. I paid a captain every Thursday to go, and as soon as we went back to the meeting, it was like somebody crumpled up the piece of paper and threw it over their head. And we're just like, we're not going to work on that. So I was like, okay, and we moved on to the next thing, and we never got back to it. And then suddenly in April, we were like, everybody's moving to here. But that place can have up to 6 inches of standing water when the rain comes, so who gets that ticket spot? I mean, there needs to be infrastructure questions too.
So
But I don't,
I think the person to talk to on all that would be Jeremy.
I talked to him
He's the planner.
a month ago, and he said there was nothing,
yeah.
no plans
I
yet.
don't understand why you say it's been a proven done deal, because we.
Yeah,
We don't know anything about it.
the shop.
You know what? Maybe I'm misinformed.
Well, here's what I can do on this subject. I can go to Audra and the select board, and first I'll go to Audra, and I'll see where we are with that idea. And I'll make sure that before we do anything else on that, we make sure that you guys are 100% on board. How's that?
I mean, that
Deal?
would be wonderful to
Is
have.
that a deal?
some
That's a deal I'm making right now. All right, can we move on?
Move on.
I would suggest that we've identified 2 topics for further discussion: the licensing agreements with the day sailors, and now the ticket sale situation, which affects the licensing agreement.
Exactly.
So I would just suggest that we put those on a future agenda and invite Jeremy, certainly, possibly Audra, but maybe just a select board liaison would be sufficient, and have a separate topic of that, because I do think that this discussion of the ticket sales it has one of the largest impacts on all these 7 businesses, so it's an important, let's,
Just so we know, we are open to changes, we don't want to just stay where we are, but I will recommend that whatever changes they do, that they do it like, everybody goes down there and see what's going on, because it's easy to
So-
sit on a table and like, and
So
recommend
here's
things,
a
but-
suggestion.
Yeah.
You know, pay attention, come up with ideas, put on your thinking caps. Everybody else here, go down there, understand it, think about it, and see if we can come up with a better
Yeah.
Best way is to go and look at it.
Yeah, I've got some great ideas right off the bat.
Yeah, on the ticket sales piece, I think that, changing the way, where you guys are selling from, haven't made its way to the select board yet. I think that died this summer when people realized that you guys were gonna have time to change anything at that point. So it has not, been finalized for discussion on the select board. So I think that, I don't think anybody wants to just move you guys arbitrarily unless we know that it's gonna improve the way that things flow down there without really adversely affecting
Yeah.
the way you guys sell. So Aaron, if you're saying that logistically, there's phone lines and there's a lot of other things that go into it, I don't think anybody wants to move you guys into a place where that,
Yeah.
putting the cart before the horse. So I certainly think if the committee wants to look at that, I don't think that the select board is gonna say,
Yeah.
let's just do it. I think everybody wants everyone to be on the same page, and the idea here is that it's a positive move forward for everybody that uses the landing. You guys are part of that.
Yeah. I think we'd be all super stoked to find a way to have like a boarding area.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, thanks for that, Taylor. Mr. Chairperson, I actually have some drawings, some new ideas that I can share with these guys, and they can shoot some holes in it.
yeah. And I've taken some
Obviously,
pictures
and you
too,
guys
to
too,
just
yep.
show you that
Really good ideas.
there are some drainage issues.
Okay, can we move on?
Yeah. Yeah. Can we just say thank you?
Yeah.
Thanks. I really appreciate
Well,
this
no,
forum.
I meant move on
Oh.
with a discussion with you guys.
Oh, sorry.
In the licensing agreement, how do you guys interpret the parking down there?
Our use of the parking?
Yes.
Um,
Interpret the way the licensing agreement reads.
We have a parking permit for each boat, basically.
And.
And then the parking with the customers?
All day? No.
Yes,
for the boats.
yeah.
Allows you to park there all day?
I had a great talk with Scotty recently about this parking thing, mostly because I knew that he would know what I was saying was kind of true. So I could tell you by what time of day whose cars are going to come in and where they're going to park. You know what I mean? Like I could tell you who moves their cars all day long. But it was a really good conversation, not just for me, but one thing that we talked about was just putting the permitted parking spots in one place so that they would know exactly who had a permit. And so he could just breeze through there. Because what he has a problem with, and I get it, right? If I give my parking permit to Tom on the days I'm not working, then there's another vehicle that's got to learn. But what if Tom decides to take his motorcycle that day and tape the permit to the top? Or what if, like, it's a little difficult to discernate what our, so we tell all of our people, right, that on the website and all of the people coming to buy tickets that there's 2-hour parking. But Scott thinks it would be better just to charge parking down there because he thinks that if people were paying a little bit, and I want Scott to say this, I would rather he be in the room, but I always fought against this for years, but I'm actually starting to see that a lot of people are using that parking lot as a free parking lot as their employee parking lot. But I would tell you that if my employees didn't use a parking permit and they parked down there and it wasn't an emergency, because there's every once in a while it was an emergency, I would fire them. Because I just don't want to ever get into this conversation.
So,
But that's just my person, not all of us.
a couple of thoughts. You know, the town is now has a new parking lot.
Yeah.
So I think the discussions are that you guys will start parking up there. Just so, I mean, you guys are like notified and, you know, thinking along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not hit off guard.
Do you know what?
The other option, I mean, there's been question about the fishermen parking spots and if they need all those spots. And, you know, maybe some of those spots could become the permitted parking spots. But, you know, I've read this licensing agreement several times.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I keep reading that is that it doesn't give you a permit to park in that lot all day long. It says, and it exclusively prohibits any of your employees from parking in that parking lot as part of the license agreement. All right, I'll read it. I mean, the licensee shall prohibit any employee, supplier, contractor, or agent of the licensee or any crew member of the day-sailing vessel from parking in the parking space at the public landing. That's in the agreement.
With the exception of one parking space for one
Right.
vehicle owned or used by the licensee or an employee of the
Right.
licensee. It's
Yup.
kind of contradictory, that's.
No, and then the next sentence, it is the intent of the Camden to allow the licensee to use one parking space at the public landing for a vehicle to be parked in that parking space during emergencies for the storage of brochures and other supplies to provide shelter for employees during inclement weather, and for no other purpose whatsoever.
And
So-
I think the reason, the way I'm reading that, and per experience, is if you're selling, and you would know this as well, if you're selling tickets down there and a thunderstorm comes up,
Yep.
you need a place to go quickly.
Yep.
And that is what I've understood that parking space to be. The car is the shelter of refuge. And I think it is appropriate for the town to be providing that literally place of
Yeah,
refuge.
because my office is never open.
His office doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean,
It can get a little dicey at times.
that's what
So-
we've always been told.
Well, that's,
And I think you're right, Mark, that it says during emergencies, and I think it should probably say
For.
use, you know, in emergencies, because I think that's the way I read it, and I think that's the way it should be used,
Because
not as,
well,
you know.
I have been the ambulance a few times in my lifetime down there. Like, hey, you need to get the car right now.
yeah.
It hasn't always been, well, honestly, it really has only been one time have I ever had anyone get hurt on my boat, but 20 years I'm all right with that. But you know, it
You'd be surprised. I mean, I think every year, probably on average, I've at least towed in one boat and had to like help with an emergency somewhere. Last year, it was a guy that fell in the water in the winter.
I think 7 parking spots. I mean, you're looking at the whole picture, 7 parking spots for all of the licensed boats, that's not the issue. The issue, if you wanna solve the parking lot problem, the issue is all of the rest of the employees of all the businesses around, without saying names, like there is other boats that they park in those parking lots, and they move those cars around all day long when they mark their tires, so.
That's a parking enforcement issue. That's not,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
nothing.
it's not 7 parking spots, it's like half of that parking lot is employees.
Yeah.
All the businesses around, so it's just parking enforcement, it's not just our 7 parking.
Well, Scott told me that you only have to move like 100 feet or something like that to not break the law, so.
If you're a business owner down there, and you know that the town has given each boat a parking spot to park there, then that creates your attitude. Well, they can park there, why can't I?
Well, you know,
They do business here, so do we, you know?
Because they have a physical business that disappears for 2 hours at a time, and this is their,
yeah.
their location. their-
It's our trash removal, it's our recycling, it's our, you know, it's our catering.
Comes and goes every day with my vehicle.
But,
So it'd be drive the booth down to the harbor, drive to the all-day parking lot, walk down to the harbor, do the day, walk to the all-day parking lot, drive down to the harbor, pick the booth up, put it in the car, drive home. Like,
That's what we have.
and you,
it's a little bit laborious, I mean, but like, I understand if that's not what you want.
I think that sometimes the frustration comes is that I feel like we get blamed for all of the parking, like whether it,
One concept is maybe we could just combine it all.
but
You could put your tables in the back of your pickup truck and
we were actually thinking if the town produced a van for us, coffee makers, but no, I mean, I think that this is also another issue, and I think that like, I think it goes back to this thing, is like, we'd rather work with you and say, hey, these are the reasons why, and not just get the answer that because we told you can't. Because I feel like it becomes a lot of, this is what you can do. And then like, it puts us on the defensive.
yeah, and I'm just telling you.
Yep.
That, you know, part of the reason they want to move your tables.
Yep.
Is because you've taken over the whole dock. All right, it's perception, and your cars are always down there.
So,
All right, so you've taken over the waterfront down there.
Yep.
And that's the perception, and that's what's creating all these
Yeah.
requests for changes.
Okay. I'm not saying no. What I'm saying is like, I'm understanding.
Yep.
Just without saying the day sailors, Aaron Lincoln, have really spent some time with us this year because I just don't want to think what all this good that I think I do and this tremendous amount of work that I put in to do what I do is being looked at negatively. So I've just gone to the people and said, hey, Scott, I'd like to understand more about parking. Could you tell me? And not have it come from somebody else. Just I have it from the guy who's dealing with the parking. So I feel like I've learned a lot, but I'm not saying, no, we can't make a change. I'm not. Aaron Lincoln's not. But I get it. But I think it goes back to that bigger picture of working together and not working against each other.
Well, and that's the point, okay, we're a committee.
Yep.
Okay, so we really have no authority.
Mhm.
We're not gonna tell you, you know, you can't park there anymore. We're just advisory.
I have,
It's up to the town. So that's what we're here for also, to work with you and to, you know, try to come up with resolutions. And we've got this issue, let's figure it out.
yeah, so maybe we need a loading and unloading spot or something different, but I think we would all be willing to work with you.
And I think that maybe it's on us to work on those perceptions, because I agree 7 spots is not breaking the back of that parking lot. There's a lot of other things, and it's not on us to shine the spotlight on troublemakers who are making other things look poorly. I do think we can talk about perception in some of our problem solving to because it's a squeaky wheel stuff.
It's easy to see whose cars are these when we have a tag. Oh, that's surprise, it's heritage, so we know which cars are which. But do you know what cars are for Appledore? No, you don't, because they don't have a tag.
Right.
And they have like 6 employees
I know,
in the
but-
whole parking
but
in 1 minute.
they're a schooner. So their perception, I mean, it's not right, but their
Yeah, I understand.
perception is, well, those boats can park
Yeah,
here.
but it's
We
easy
can
to
park there.
attack us that we have a tag.
I
And
know.
you're not attacking Appledore that they don't have a tag.
And they're also not running on public property.
Yeah.
They have private parking
So,
out back they're not using.
I don't think the 7 parking lots is the issue, it's the whole parking lot. I think you need to do like Central Survey, for example, like, and see who uses the parking lot. Then have someone there, like, asking questions to every car,
Yeah.
like, for example.
We actually thought about paying somebody to come and just ask everybody why they park down there for the day. Because the worst thing about having a 2-hour parking spot is that people come and get a ticket even though it says 2 hours. And then they come back and yell. I've had people take a ticket seller of mine and threaten them. I've had them reduced to tears because they got a ticket and they couldn't read 2-hour parking in front. Scott tells me all the time, people come up there and say, I validated that they had parking and they need to remove the ticket. And so at the end of every season, when they changed the ticket seller, I took them aside and say, I will never tell anybody ever that they can park down here and get a freebie. Just so you know, like, if they come up to your office, I never said that.
Mr. Chairperson, I think my weed whacker's almost out of gas here, and unfortunately, I have we're just kind of getting the weeds here a little bit. I want to talk about these 2 bench applications, and I have if it's okay with you, I have something I need to do at low tide. It's tide dependent, and so I kind of need to take off pretty soon here. I was wondering if possibly we could move on, just because I don't want to leave and not get, there's 2 bench applications that I want to talk about.
Sounds lovely. Could we revisit these other issues at another time? And I would like to reiterate, thank you. I really appreciate this forum.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, guys. I appreciate it.
So just let us know what you need from us and we'll be back. Thanks for saying that too. Truly. I didn't mean to have that the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize that I have to leave, but I've got someone who's actually needs to, I'm going to set him to actually be working on the new public haul out for the dinghies at Curtis Island. We're fixing that up, making it so no rocks are going to be in place. We have a nice, easy path to get your dinghy in and out of the haul out area. And he's doing it with no cost to the town. He needs to have some community service he needs to do.
Community service.
Yeah,
You make good use of those kids.
I do.
Imply there's all kids, but
Young adults.
All right, so,
So I'm not sure if you could,
Give a harbor master report or no?
yeah, Harbor Master report, huh?
This is Harbor Master Association.
Yeah.
That's Harbor Master
I
report.
was wondering if that was a print. We have a Harbor Masters Association, and I wasn't sure what that was on there for. That's in Castine every year. I go every other year. Yeah. Well, my report is a couple things real quick. One is I have a letter from a mother of a child who is in the racing program, and supposedly the launch for one of the cruise ships came and put their bow thruster right in and almost tipped the kid over, and then the crew on the boat like giggled or laughed at him. I'm looking into it now. I also have another person in the community that said that they were going way too fast, and I talked to the driver that day. So I'm dealing with issues like that, and I wanted to bring that to your attention.
What boat was that?
This was Launch 8 for both the Independence and the Constitution, yeah. Both cruise ships. So we're definitely having a couple issues, and I just recently told the Mike Dunn, who is in charge of operations for that company, that I no longer want them anchoring over in the actual outer harbor. I want them over between Dillingham Point and Curtis Island because it takes too much space in that area. And Northeast Channel. So he was glad to do that. So, but I just want to keep you apprised that it's just becoming more and more some issues that are coming up because of them coming here. We've been, my department and me have been working on dinghies and canoes and kayaks, looking at trying to arrange them a little bit. And we put a 2x6 up on one area so they don't slide into the last permitted spot for finger floats next to the falls. And, we're still working on that because this year, I think more than ever, we have a lot of dinghy permits.
So that's coming out this way, the stern of that last slip.
Yeah. It's a,
Ran this away so that that boat on the end isn't sticking out, so you have to get into the rocks there.
well, we actually just changed it. I don't know when the last time you looked at it was.
A week or two ago.
Yeah, we'll look at it again. Just so, because we actually changed the look.
We did?
We actually changed it, yeah. That's funny. Yeah, that's about it. I've been trying to do some more databasing to the harbor, updating my database. So my report is about that, and the fact that we are really busy right now. If it's possible, could we move to the bench applications, Mr. Chairperson? Just
Ken,
we've got two. We've got one from Suzanne Williams and one for Ralph Kelly.
Suzanne
Okay.
had already submitted, and I had brought up the question of overlooking from the park.
right,
Yeah.
that's why we put it on hold.
I called her, I talked to her. She had contacted the library and it was too expensive, so she wanted to resubmit for a harbor bench. So I told her I would put it through.
It's rare that this committee would deny an application. It's only happened once since I've been harbor master. It seems like it's a little less stringent now than it was on what the tie is. This was originally, to have a memorial bench, you had to have very strong ties to the community. And I don't know what that means, but this committee would advise the select board and me if they thought there was enough ties to merit that. I can't help you there. I don't know Suzanne. I do know that I remember when Johnny Carson was in town. That's her description. She talks about how happy her sister was when Johnny Carson waved to them from his big boat. That was a long time ago.
How long are we for space down there?
That was my question.
We have one. I just was told that looks like the one. Yeah, there's the one. I could put another one up next to the grass and the bell where the waterfalls are. I could put another one there. It would fit perfect. So that takes care of, I guess, Suzanne. And then it looks like we are going to get rid of one because someone's not going to renew. That's the one for Linda Bartlett. They're not going to renew that.
After 10 years? Because it's every 10
No, it's already been 10 years. It's already coming up.
Oh, okay.
So Ralph Kelly, I don't know if you guys had the honor of knowing Ralph Kelly, but he was definitely a character, and he's been coming to the harbor for many, many years, and he passed away. So he had El Dream, a little sailboat called El Dream, and he had his wife and his daughter. I forget her name. Yeah, she had special needs. She was a very long black hair, and she would always, be down at the harbor every night. Yeah.
So we only have 2 slots?
Right now, we'd have one new area where the grass is. I could put another one up there next to the waterfalls, and
Anything in the works or coming up for Sam Manning?
That's what I was just going to ask.
I haven't heard anything. I don't think Susan hasn't said anything to me that she was interested. I mean,
If
The
that's
town
coming
should
up,
be
that's a
offering
given.
one to them.
That's-
Rather than the reverse.
yeah. I wouldn't be able to know because there's no application at this time for that. I mean, obviously, I agree. I mean, that would be, we could put one up, since Sam and Susan would always have lunch on the harbor master's deck. We could take that lobster chair out and put one there if she wanted to, and I think she'd probably like that. So, kind of like, rock star. So I guess we could, you could say yes to both these applications.
Can I just, there is room at Steamboat Are you waiting until there's the bigger discussion about redevelopment?
Yeah, but you also told me you wanted to.
Because it's so popular down there.
It
now.
is.
Every time I go down there.
That little bit of effort that I made with the highway to improve that area with the bigger rocks and make that, made it so all of a sudden, and putting that bench there, made it so people really do go there. I'd like to keep going with that.
But I had heard at some point,
Well, sure, that's in limbo because Lyman Morris is definitely looking at, extending their marina, so.
but anyway, that's just another option.
So,
We don't want to get too crowded downtown.
how do we feel? Motion to accept these?
I would make a motion to accept both of them.
Second?
But I'd also think it behooves us to actually approach the Mannings and offer them a spot. If we, to me, Camden should be offering a
So-
bench to the Mannings, particularly in your.
But yeah, and if you think you've got a
Well, I
sort of
think-
place of honor.
It
Do we
changes the
have that
dynamic.
authority?
I don't know,
mean,
but.
I think we have to ask the selectmen, the select board.
Yeah, we could,
I think it'd be the right thing to do.
I agree.
I think we're the only ones that approve these.
Oh.
I can only speak for myself, but it sounds like a great idea to me.
Okay.
I'm sure that nobody would disagree with me.
Yeah.
I guess that's my only concern is if we approve these two, are we precluding the option for having a bench for Sam?
So I would amend the motion to approve these two and also request the select board authorize a bench for Sam Manning.
At the hut.
All right,
Okay?
that's a good idea. I like it.
All in favor?
We adjourned?
No, I have different agendas here. Under old business was the work plan.
Is it okay if I go to put this kid to work? Yeah, all right, awesome. Hey, thanks, you guys. I think you guys are doing a great job. That was a good meeting because the day sailors, it gets a little heated with those guys, and
They seem quite pleasant.
they do. And they'll come to me later and then be like, but the fact is, I think they know that there's a spot for them always in the town. When we moving forward, we just have to figure out, how we want to present that. They're an asset to the town. We just got to make sure they're not become, a burden.
What, in an idea, I almost threw it out there, but I didn't. But here's a concept. What if instead of having day sailor permits, windjammer permits, we just had commercial vessel permits? And
You're waited for Ron to leave to propose.
no, I'm not proposing, I'm just
Just an idea,
out there
yeah.
as an idea.
Yeah.
And would that maybe just kind of simplify everything?
No, it's a good idea. And then before I leave, I want to just throw my idea out, and it may be, again, just an idea. I have an issue with flooding with my office because it's right there, and we have an issue with parking stuff. What if when we designed a harbor master's office, which is raised up, and underneath it, which would be half open and be shaded, that's where, I could have like a nice, staircase that went down with a flag post, and we had the day sailor operations under that office.
That would be giving you a raise.
Yes, I like that.
But then they're still
Your office, ADA compliant.
Well, they'd be flooding, limited action on high tide, but they could leave, they could take their tables and leave, Just an idea. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, Steve.
I'd also like to propose that we do either schedule a time as a committee or make it incumbent upon us to go down and see the operation and see his corner idea, whatever, just so that we've got more of a visual.
I spent a lot of time down there.
I do too, and I think it's, but the distinction between public and private is where the tension really is. And we are only allowed to deal with the public.
Yes.
And it's tough, but at some point, we're gonna have to talk about that. And what's the integration with the private dock, and how can we bring those parties in to part of the conversation? So that they're not just flouting their ability to kind of do what they want. And but, because that is a huge
And
tension.
you know, actually, I did think about that, okay? And what we're doing is we're doing licensing agreements for boats that operate off of town property. What if we do licensing agreements for harbor-wide? I mean, you're operating out of Camden Harbor. And, I mean, I've discussed this with Jeremy and Audra, and they're looking into it, but, you know, because these,
Level the playing
all
field.
these boats, they operate out of the harbor. They affect the traffic in the harbor. So what if, per se, you know, any of the commercial docks in town decide to bring in another big day sailor? It affects the harbor. We should have the right to license them and review them. And that would put Appledore in the licensing agreement field.
What are you gonna do about commercial fishermen and the yacht club sailing program?
And the kayaks.
Well, commercial fishermen are not part of are not considered part of the day sailor or windjammer, and I know what you're saying.
Well, if you're gonna license anybody that's operating vessels in Camden Harbor, which is what you said. You didn't say-
For commercial purposes.
Yeah,
for-
well, a fisherman's commercial.
No.
They're making money.
Do they need a license to operate?
They have a permit from the town of Camden
Well, I know,
for the
but
dock
I'm
usage.
talking about a captain's license.
What about chartering off of a floating pier, the floating moorings? There's people that do that occasionally, not as a full-time business.
Yeah.
That's another,
You're.
and you have different dock users.
Good can of
I
worms
think-
there,
I think-
huh?
I think you're at the top of a slope that is, and it's
Yep.
raining.
And
Well,
different
well,
docks have different usages.
I-
Some are shared and some are full-time, so, you know, you're gonna have to,
Yep.
it'll be hard.
But it is a conversation
Yeah,
worth having, because I
definitely.
think, thinking about parking, a good lobsterman's home by noon. So why do they have a parking spot for the whole day? You know, and things like that, you know, so it's a
You know
bag.
what? You talk to the lobsterman
I know.
and say,
They
why
need
can't
to
we
be able to
park
go
here
out.
on Sunday? You know?
We can park there until.
Well, if there's nobody else there.
But anyway, I just,
No, lobsterman,
again,
I'm
I
talking
think
about
that there's
lobsterman.
bigger,
How come it's not
bigger
reserved for
use
them on
issues.
Sunday?
Because there's no Sunday fishing here.
I know, but they say, well, that's when we do maintenance on it. Yeah.
You can go down there on Sunday and.
I know.
In the morning,
I
there's
know.
plenty of parking.
And you
in
know
the
what?
afternoon, it's full of some other,
And,
I won't mention the name.
and that's another thought process too. It's like, you know, how many spots do they really need? And because I see a lot of empty spots there.
And those spots do get used by the harbor master staff
Yep,
heavily.
yep. So, and so that may be something we can like tie in with the harbor master staff or the day sailors or,
Right.
you know, whatever, but.
But I do think perception, to some degree, begins to fall on us to try to reverse it. Can't ever control it, but I absolutely hear what you're saying, that there is a perception, but
Well, I see the
We
problem
don't
you're trying to
agree with
solve, because with two separate licenses, you've got the two groups fighting each other over this, that, and the other thing, because they're different, and all,
Yeah.
if you can combine them.
But there are a lot of different things in the.
And there
two
are.
in the two businesses and stuff like that, then there's.
And it's further compounded by the fact that some of the windjammers operate from the library park, from Harbor Park, and some of them operate from the town landing, which in going through the agreements is not reflected and adds a whole new element, you know what I mean? Looking at the Mainway Jimmer Cruises, the license agreement that they signed talks all about Harbor Park, you know, what, it doesn't make any sense. So I think there's a lot of merit to talking about passenger vessels, however we phrase it, as opposed to windjammers or day sailors.
And maybe it's that, maybe it's sailing versus motorized and.
And I'm just throwing it out there as a discussion point in the future, and a thought process in the future, and it's, because I mean, they all affect each other.
Absolutely.
But, and, you know, with that said, I mean, we're not, the feeling I get from the town is that we do not want to get in the middle of how businesses operate their business. It's all about how it affects the harbor, the community, public property. So, you know, that's why I'm thinking, you know, if we tie it in to like all boats in the harbor, that's what affects the harbor. It affects the channel coming in and out. I mean, every single time, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but every single time you go in and out of this harbor, you're dealing with a day sailor. And it's just, if there are, you know, when there are seven or how many do we have now? 10, really. It's not a big deal, but what happens if we have 20? What if we have, what if we have a boat that can carry 60 passengers that decides, or can rent Willie's Wharf or buys Willie's Wharf? Or, you know, that's done.
But we do affect the businesses, because we say what kind of boats can be here.
Yes, you know what, we do, but any decision the town makes affects businesses.
Yeah.
All right, when we decide on fast food.
Right,
Right?
yeah.
That affects all the restaurants in town. When we decide on, you know, whatever decisions the town makes on something, affects other businesses. So we can't really.
Yeah,
You understand? Okay. What are you saying? Work plan, does anybody that picked up any of the work plan projects have anything to report?
Well, Josh and I have communicated about reviewing the license agreements. I've reached out to Sandy Welty and to solicit his input regarding these agreements, but we haven't had that exchange yet. But Josh and I intend to continue that effort. And today's discussion had a lot of,
Adds to it.
yeah.
So, and hopefully that helps you, that you understand that Jeremy was a big resource there, and Audra. They both have a lot of thoughts they want to put into that.
Okay.
Anything else?
But if we agreed on the 3 years, when they go to make their applications this year, are we suggesting that they're going to be making an application for a 3-year license?
Yes.
If we move forward
That's
with
what
that,
we're-
yeah.
So were we proposing to the select board that, I mean, I guess I'm still trying to figure out process. Are we doing it piecemeal or within?
I feel like we're in an information gathering period here, and with the day sailors have volunteered their input, and I think there's more dialogue necessary along those lines. So I personally don't feel it's.
With that
I just
said,
see us running out of time.
I believe, I've got to find my calendar here, but I believe it's November.
Yes.
that we have to propose this to the select board.
Well, I think it's actually before
That's-
then,
yeah, it's
because
before,
they
because that's when
submit,
they
they
are-
submit their
And
applications.
you're gonna have, and the town's gonna
They're
have to
submitting.
modify that application, and
That's
that
right.
probably should be done in September.
Yeah.
They get those in October.
They get them in October.
Yeah.
And then they come before you, you go to the select board for them.
That's-
Yeah, so I think certainly over the next month or so, we need to be, ironing this out.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
Can't kick this,
skip any,
no.
you don't have any time to waste here.
So,
And I do think that looking at the day sailor agreements and what currently are the Windjammer agreements, I think I was sort of hoping we could look at them one at just at the day sailors and then just at the Windjammers, but because there is so much overlap between the two, I think we kind of have to look at them all, over the next 2 months.
well, the Windjammer's not due until 1st January, is that right?
Well, the Windjammers sign their agreements in March.
March or April. Yeah, I forget the timing, but it's different than the day sailors.
It's a little bit different process there.
Yeah, so the way I understand it is that we need to really, Windjammer's May 1st. When you sign their agreement. We really need to focus on the day sailors.
Right. But I think one does influence the other.
What are your thoughts? I mean, should we get together for a work group, and now that we've listened to the day sailors, and just formalize our recommendations for the town manager and the select board of what should be in the agreement?
Well, you've indicated that the town manager and Jeremy have some input to make here.
Yes.
So
So maybe
I'd like
we
to
could
get
put
that.
together-
I'd like to know what that is.
Maybe we could put together a work session with Jeremy, and maybe just like knock out some kind of drafts and wording, and come up with a document
Great idea.
that we can start massaging.
We
2
wanna-
weeks, within the next 2 weeks?
Do we want to hear from the Windjammers about the day sailor
No.
license? No, okay.
What's their standing for the day
Yeah,
sailors?
yeah,
You know, and it was
Yeah.
the same
You
thing.
want to make sure the day sailors
I
are
mean-
in your work section, for their license.
well, the day sailors are trying to affect the Windjammer licenses.
No?
I think for a work session,
No,
I think
yeah,
the
this is
benefit,
just
they
a
can
work
listen, of
session.
course, at an open public meeting, but I think it would be helpful for us to be able to have a conversation as a committee
Yep.
without them.
Yep.
I mean, they can, like I said, they can be here.
Yep.
And then iron that out.
I think so too. And maybe at the next meeting, we can present our proposed draft to the day sailors. And that, in our next meeting, we can get input from the day sailors. Clear? Make sense?
On that topic, Mark, I'm skeptical of the 3 years, at least at this point.
Yeah.
I think there's enough potential issues with some of the day sailor permit holders that
Well,
we should stick with it 1 year for a little while longer.
that's why I suggested we do the annual review.
And there are other ways of accomplishing that, but,
Yeah.
I think,
Simplify the renewal process for some of them?
yeah, I understand their point, but, the fact is that they've been running with single-year licenses for quite a while,
Yeah?
and,
Even though they're booking out more?
yeah. And
But do you have a specific reason why you would not want to, grant a 3-year license?
I think there's a difference between reviewing what has happened last year as opposed to approving a new license. The 3-year license, you'd really have to have I think, as a practical matter, you'd have to have some extraordinary circumstances
To deny it?
to deny approval of it.
Right.
Whereas, the yearly license, you look at everybody with as a blank sheet of paper. You know, Ray doesn't even have Sally in the water, I don't believe. I mean, I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it's not out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But, and, you know, there is the issue of, should someone hold a permit for a boat that doesn't get used? You know?
That's part of the, yeah, that's, I think
Well,
that's a great.
but that's part of the review
Part
process.
of the discussion.
All right, so
But-
so
and I
the
don't
review
wanna-
process
yeah.
comes up every year. You say, okay, what's the story on this boat? Well, it never went in the water. Okay, pull the permit.
Yeah, I'd rather work from that point rather than deny everybody an opportunity to
Yeah.
stabilize
You
their
need to give them
business.
some
Yeah.
stability, some long-term plan.
Business needs stability.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and
The review.
on the same token, you know, I mean, that may be why they get so riled up, is because they don't have stability.
And they don't feel like
As
they've
long
got,
as
they've
there's
got their back.
some sort of an annual provision, annual certification
Yeah.
check, whatever it is, there has to be that, then I think that could work. But I think, Richard, I think you're right, that there needs to be something annually that allows you, if something is not working, to sort of say, wait a minute, let's pause
Step
here.
in,
Yeah.
But
They're
not
up.
let one bad apple.
And that's, you know, so, and I think that's what we ought to put in the agreement, is that an informal annual review process by the harbor master and the harbor committee. Something like that.
Which should be done at the end of every summer anyway. Just, how did it go?
Yep. So,
2 weeks?
time? Want to do 2 weeks? You want to do it next week? Let's,
Go get my phone.
while everything's fresh. Why don't we don't need, we can close the meeting, can't we? Before we determine what date.
Set a date.
Because I'd like to go see if Jeremy's here and see if we can set up a time with him, right? Okay, meeting adjourned.
I don't think I could do next Wednesday, just. Could do the 21st.
Any other ideas?